Great Debaters Contest is brought to you by Safaricom M-Pesa. The Great Debaters Contest 2016 registration is now open. Teachers or school administrations should register on www.greatdebaterscontest.com/register.
Welcome to the Great Debaters Contest. We are bringing you the best minds in Nairobi region. I am Austin Nyambok.
And I am Mariam Bishar. Today we have an all-ladies battle for you. State House Girls goes versus Loreto Convent Valley Road. And they are debating on whether poverty and exclusion are the main instigators of terrorism. Let the debate begin. Proposer number 1, you have 3 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, what is terrorism? Though it might be my first time on the Great Debaters podium, let me, Eden Kagweria, and my team from Loreto Convent Valley Road enlighten you. Terrorism are violent actions designed to cause terror and fear. But then again, terrorism might be defined as the use of violence and intimidation. But by far, the most accurate definition of terrorism would be the threatened or actual use of illegal force and violence by a non-state actor to attain a political, economic, or social goal through fear and intimidation. This definition goes to the extent of covering the causes of terrorism. Terrorists are simply people who foster perceptions of unfairness because they have been disadvantaged in economic opportunity, social status, political voice, and cultural expressions. Terrorists are most of them, by virtue of their education, are potential members of the elite, but for some reason or another have been excluded. How would you feel if you burn the midnight oil and qualify for the topmost position only for you to be excluded simply because you are part of the minority? The frustration of their exclusion opts them to target other civilians who they perceive are complicit with the government policies, especially if those civilians benefit tremendously from the government. The alienation, envy, and hatred that result from political and social-economic exclusion drive the terrorists into radicalization and support for extremism. The exclusion causes them to band together. After all, they say, birds of a feather flock together. And as they come together, they become jaded towards the community around them, and the immense hatred results into terrorism. Because that group of people have been excluded from opportunities, including job opportunities, poverty then slowly encroaches into their lives. They become desperate to satisfy their basic needs and those of their families in order to survive. They say a drowning man clutches at a straw. Who then among us will not do anything in order to survive? If we spend every waking hour of our lives focused on our survival, wouldn't we then take anything that comes our way? Yes, poverty and exclusion are the key instigators of terrorism. Thank you.
State House Girls, you have 3 minutes for your opening statements.
My name is Sialo Tobiko from the State House Girls High School. Of the contrary opinion that poverty and exclusion are the key instigators of terrorism. Saturday, 21st September 2013 is definitely not the day I was born. It is the day the Westgate shopping mall attack went down. According to investigation, by interviewing some of the former militants of the Al-Shabaab, they admitted that it was them, the Al-Shabaab, that was behind the Westgate attack. Their reason being, they were angry at the Kenyan government because they took action by deploying the KDF in the Somalia, which is their host country. Not poverty, not exclusion. A research conducted by the Mercy Corps organization shows that it is only an assumption that most of the Kenyan youth who are unable to make a licit living opt for terrorism. But the major question, the $64,000 question is, what does? The object of poverty is poverty. The object of exclusion is exclusion. And definitely, the object of terrorism is just that, terrorism. A 23-year-old former militant was interviewed, and he said, "I did not join the Taliban because I was poor, but because I was angry." Why angry? Because I was tired of seeing people coming to my country, bombing us. I was tired of people coming to my country and killing the fellow citizens of my country. The object of terrorism is terrorism. A researcher by the name Alberto Abadie concludes that the risk of terrorism is not significantly higher in poorer countries. Take an example of Zimbabwe. Under terrorism, we never hear them. We never, ever hear them. But when it comes to the economic status, it's just down there. It's just down there. We cannot compare. Okay, fine. Let me take you to Australia. Just picture yourself in Australia, that hot desert. It is way, way, way far from the rest of the world. It is excluded. But how many times has Australia hit the headlines in terms of terrorism? How many times have we had that terrorist attacks have been found in Australia? Exclusion does not lead to terrorism. With me, I have the book Kidagaa Kimemozea by Ken Walibora. I believe all of you are familiar with it. I will refer you to page 27, and I read, "Husuda, mauaji, uongo, usongombwingo na vita yametendwa katika jina la Mungu." Translated to mean, enmity, murder, dishonesty, and war has been caused by commitment to revolution in faith. People, open your eyes wide open. Wake up to the reality. Wake up and smell the roses. Poverty and exclusion are not the key instigators of terrorism. Thank you.
We'll hear rebuttals now. Loreto, you have the stage.
Ladies and gentlemen, as you have heard from my fellow debaters, terrorism is a broad and controversial subject. In order to understand its causes better, I will break it down into different types. Terrorism is broken down into political terrorism, official or state terrorism, data terrorism, and lastly, passive terrorism. Passive terrorism is the mostly wide practiced form of terrorism, and it is practiced by the largest amount of people. Why? Well, it is a non-involvement and non-participation in countering terrorism. Many Kenyans, in fact, 45.9% of the population, according to statistics from the Africa from Africa blog, are at the country's poverty line. May I ask you, if I was poor, would my first thought be to cater for my needs or to report criminal or terrorist activities to the government that has failed to give me good social and economic resources? Of course, it would be to cater for my needs. As a result, terrorists are able to use areas such as Kenya to breed terrorist activities without the fear of being ratted out by the public. They are also able to use poverty-minded people as foot soldiers because, of course, they're fighting to get their basic needs. Example, in the Westgate attack, named by my opponent here, the soldiers were sent to fight the terrorists, but ended up looting Westgate instead of helping the victims and fighting the terrorists because they had a poverty mentality. Yeah. Well, have you ever heard of terrorist recruitment in areas such as Lavington, in Muthaiga? No. But you hear terrorist recruitment in areas such as Mathare, Majengo, Kibera. Isn't it true? Don't they aim for the poor people? One of the debaters in this team here said that Al-Shabaab said that their main cause of attacking Kenya was because of anger at the Kenyan government. Well, this is really what it means. Al-Shabaab was angry at the Kenyan government because the Somalian government has excluded them from decision-making in Somalia. My name is Catherine Jerry from Loreto Convent Valley Road, here to propose a motion that poverty and exclusion are the key instigators of terrorism. Thank you.
State House Girls, you have 3 minutes.
A man is a product of his thought. What he thinks is what he becomes. Sagal Dahir from State House High School. Telling us types of terrorism instead of telling us how poverty and exclusion instigate terrorism has not helped the motion. Furthermore, poverty and exclusion are not twins biologically if you do biology. I add, the fact that they could sit down and plan terrorism attack is being rich mentally and not poor mentally. You see, blaming poverty allows us to erroneously believe that we can buy security. Our government is on its knees in the intensive care unit because of insecurity due to terrorism. So why don't IMF, World Bank, and other donor nations surrender all their wealth to Kenya and see if terrorism will cease in Kenya, and see if a Form 4 will cease terrorizing a Form 1. We should not, and I repeat, we should not give terrorists what they want. Rather, remove the reasons for their despair and their heart, because the root cause of terrorism is the despair and frustration caused by unjustifiable deeds done to people. For instance, people who practice the freedom of expression are terrorizing our grammatical way of life. For instance, George Major, George Maina, George Boker have a good command of the English language. They induce fear to me. They challenge me. What type of poverty are they suffering from? People, we are arguing that for us to end terrorism, let's end poverty. Then, why don't we kill all poor people and excluded people to see if terrorism will cease? Thank you.
The Great Debaters Contest 2016 registration is now open. Teachers or school administrations should register on www.greatdebaterscontest.com/register. The Great Debaters Contest 2016 registration is now open. Teachers or school administrations should register on www.greatdebaterscontest.com/register.
The proposition have been asked that they stated that poorer countries tend to have higher incidences of terrorism because people do not want to report to the police, but in instances where monetary rewards are offered, doesn't it act as an incentive or a motivator to report terrorists to the police? And the opposition have been challenged, if poverty and exclusion are not the instigators of terrorism, what are? Proposal number 3, you have the stage, 3 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, my people die from lack of knowledge. Hosea chapter 4, verse 6. Now to the question, yes, there are rewards that are being given if you find terrorists, but these rewards are short-lived. You're giving me 100,000 Kenya shillings to find terrorist A, and yet I can go and work for Al-Shabaab and get more than that. According to a blog, moneyjihad.com, the Taliban is worth $70 million US, and you're telling me that 100,000 a reward that I will get? One of the opposers said that we've never heard of any terror attacks in Australia. Now, Australia has gotten terror attacks. Now, under the Prime Minister Tony Abbott, in 2013, Australia had a terrorist attack in a cafe, which is proof enough that all these countries do get terrorist attacks. Now to my first point, Pope Francis recently visited Kenya, and in an address at St. Joseph's Kangemi, he said, poverty and the politics of exclusion have driven the youth to join terror groups. Ladies and gentlemen, the reason why we have Hamas, the reason why we have ISIS, the reason why we have Al-Shabaab isn't because they just want to kill. President of Somalia, who was overthrown, he was called Said Barre, was appointed government officials from a few clans. Therefore, a few of the members of the Somali tribe felt excluded. If we had better employment opportunities in Kenya, if we had free education that would let all poor people go to schools and yes, then we wouldn't have poor people, and therefore people would work hard. We wouldn't have poverty levels as low as they are, and we as a country wouldn't have terrorist attacks. Therefore, if we feel as a country that if we as a country solve poverty, then perhaps we wouldn't have to have it as a cause of terror. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that terrorism and exclusion are key instigators, that poverty and exclusion are key instigators of terrorism. Thank you.
State House Girls, you have 3 minutes to respond to the audience.
My name is Mercy Nyaga from State House Girls. A question was posed. If poverty and exclusion does not lead to terrorism, what does? What leads to terrorism? Anger, frustration, despair, retaliating an attack done to one. If we were to look at poverty in a non-materialistic manner, then it is safe to say that if one lacks knowledge, they are poor. Such a poverty is seen in Form 3s. Well, a Form 3 has little or no knowledge concerning the Form 4 syllabus. This is why they are excluded in the list of candidates to sit for the KCSE exam. Ever since KCSE exam began, have you ever heard of a case where Form 3s decided that they would terrorize the Form 4s or the teachers? No. Now, Zachary Chesa was arrested and sentenced to 25 years in prison. He was charged with terrorism. Anwar al-Waki, a former American cleric, took up a leadership role in Al-Qaeda. Now, these two men, when investigated and a background check done, it was found out that Zachary Chesa belonged to a well-off family that lived in the Virginia suburbs. Anwar al-Waki was found out to be the son of a prominent political figure in Yemen. Looking at poverty in an economical aspect, then it means that superpowers should not experience any terrorist attacks. But this is not the case in the world. A country such as France, which is a veto power, had a terrorist attack in the year 2015 on the month of November. At least 147 people died. In the United States of America, a terrorist attack occurred in the year 2001 on the month of September. This is the famous 9/11 attack. Kenya, which is a third world country, has also experienced not one, not two, but many terrorist attacks. A good number of examples include the Mpeketoni attack, the Garissa University attack, the Mandera bus attack, the Westgate Mall attack, and many others. Kenya and the United States differ greatly economically, but both countries have experienced great cases of terrorist attack. This is evidence enough that whatever form of poverty or whatever form of exclusion does not lead to terrorism. Recently, the country was and still is in mourning after at least over 100 soldiers died after a military base in Somalia was attacked. These people, the bomb blast was described to be at least 3 times the bomb blast that occurred in the year 1988 on the United States Embassy in Kenya. To create such a device, mustn't you be rich upstairs? In conclusion, I would like to demonstrate the instigators of terrorism with my hand. My palm represents the key instigators, and my fingers, minor instigators such as poverty and exclusion. My palm can exist without my fingers, but my fingers would be nothing without my palm. Thank you.
We'll hear closing statements now. Loreto, you have the floor. 1 minute.
Ladies and gentlemen, exclusion. For a terrorist to actually plan an attack, they need to be excluded. Now, there are many ways to kill a rat, but this is not rocket science. If we want to combat terrorism, we have to eradicate poverty, we have to eradicate exclusion. And then we should no longer have to deal with terrorism as as a crime. Mr. Zachary Chester is one example of a man who lived in a very beautiful suburb, but do we not know perhaps the anger that he had and the frustration that he had was caused by exclusion? Because I have no means of explaining myself to you, therefore I am excluded. We believe poverty and terrorism are the key instigators.
State House, you have 1 minute for your final statement.
A lot has been said, but no content home. You see, we usually take pictures from the best angle to cover a growing pimple. So let us not cover the main instigators of terrorism with minor reasons, such as poverty and exclusion. Furthermore, instead of saying that poverty and exclusion are the key instigators of terrorism, it should be terrorism is the key instigator of poverty and exclusion. Thank you.
Eden, that was good definition, but I lacked examples of terror groups that we are having in the country and in the world. That is what I was asking, and I'm happy that Olivia came in, and Olivia provided us with what she considers, or the team considers, to be examples of terror groups: Hamas, ISIS, Al-Shabaab. Very good use of statistics, and you made your case. Olivia, yes, it was a bit of shaky presentation, but I learned a lot from you. First, the issue of cross-examination was well done, and then the statement made by Pope Francis when he was in the country, I think that was intelligent. You know, he's a credible source that you can use in a debate, rather, to prove your point. Excellent. And also, you made a case and say that we need to to create employment opportunities and access to education, and that will help us fight against, in our fight against terror groups. That was beautiful. Loreto Convent Valley Road, State House Girls, beautiful debate.
State House Girls High School. Tobiko, a good introduction, and one of the things that I really like about you is your voice and your stage presence. You have a voice that commands the audience attention. And you're saying in your team that, you know, poverty and exclusion are not the key instigators of terrorism. And, you know, Mercy then comes in later to tell us what these main instigators of terrorism are. You talk about anger, you talk about frustration, you talk about despair, and so on and so forth. But then one would ask that, and these then manifestations that are brought about by poverty and exclusion. Segal, your role is supposed to be that of a cross-examination. And when you make your arguments, just make sure that they are within the trail of thought so that they're not too far-fetched and the audience and the judges are struggling to figure out what's the connection between what you have said and the motion. All the best to the two schools. Good job by State House Girls as well.
To the scores now. There is only a difference of 1 point between the two teams on stage. State House Girls High School, the judges awarded you with 72%. Please give them a round of applause. Loreto Convent Valley Road, the judges gave you 71%. Good job, but that makes State House Girls our winners for today.
Congratulations to the teams on stage, and we'd like to thank our audience for being very active and participating during the questions and their comments. We also appreciate our viewers back home and urge you to follow us on our social media platforms. That is at Great Debaters EA for Twitter. I am Austin Nyumbok.
And I am Mariam Bishar. Stay tuned for more debates like this one.
The Great Debaters Contest 2016 registration is now open. Teachers or school administrations should register on www.greatdebaterscontest.com/register. The Great Debaters Contest was brought to you by Safaricom M-Pesa.